All right, today's webinar. The nice thing is it's no PowerPoint, so you don't have to sit there and be bored with a voice presentation. This one's actually going to be a kind of a hands-on walkthrough of EngraveLab and FlexiEngrave as it pertains to creating a Braille sign. I'm not going through all of the ins and outs of both programs, but I will be covering the workflow as it pertains to the Roland engraver and creating an actual Braille sign. So we're going to be going through the workflow of creating the sign itself as far as the Braille and the pictogram and raised text, and we're going to go over some of the specifications of the sign itself. As far as ADA software goes, or ADA compliant software, Roland offers two packages. Now, as you know, engraving software is bundled with all of our engravers. Most notably is Dr. Engrave. Now, Dr. Engrave is very basic entry-level software. Dr. Engrave does not give you advanced toolpath capabilities, doesn't have single-line fonts, and also does not include Braille capability as far as being able to convert text to grade 2 compliant Braille and so forth. There are Braille fonts out on the market, but it doesn't really work that way. Now, and with that said, that's the reason why we decided to bundle or sell EngraveLab. EngraveLab is kind of the primary package that we sell. That's kind of the primary package we promote. But we did find that a lot of sign shops are FlexiSign users. So what we've done is we've actually brought on FlexiEngrave as an engraving package. Again, we offer EngraveLab Expert version 8.0, and we also offer FlexiEngrave 10.0. Both of these packages do include the Braille translators. Okay? If you buy these products over the counter from CADLink, actually Flexi or Scanvic Amiable, I don't believe they sell FlexiEngrave anymore as a standalone product. They actually sell it as an add-on type product. Okay. Now the beauty is that for somebody getting into it, we have a complete package. Now, if you have users out there that are using FlexiSign or SignLab, what they can do is they can simply purchase the Engrave module to add the engraving capability and Braille capability to their software. So it does cut down on the cost. Don't quote me, but I believe the upgrade cost or the module cost is right around the $600–700 range. Okay, but if you needed an exact price, you can actually contact either of those companies as far as upgrades. So we're going to go ahead and start off with EngraveLab. Okay, now once you set plate size, your origin selections, so we'll go ahead and select the lower left corner, which is what we set up on the hardware as well, but you can do center origin, upper right, upper left, bottom right, bottom left, what have you. But by default, it's lower left-hand corner. We're going to go ahead and create just a simple 6x6 sign. Now, as far as some of the sign elements in regards to ADA signage, okay, the standard stacking order, as you will, for the sign elements is to place the pictogram or symbol, whatever the symbol is, handicap, radioactive, what have you. The symbol or pictogram would be placed at the top section of the sign, okay, in an area 6 inches, okay. Then you got and you'd have your. All right, so we're going to go with this. So sorry for the technical difficulty. All right, so going back to EngraveLab, we're going to go with an 8x8 sign. Okay. Again, as far as some of the positioning and size and the elements, again, as I stated earlier, the pictogram is going to be in the top section, then your text, and then followed by Braille at the bottom. If you're just doing, say, room numbers, where it's just the number and then the Braille, you can go with a smaller sign, 6x6 or even a 4x4. As far as spacing between the text and the borders, things of that nature, typically the borders around the entire sign should be about 5/8 of an inch. Any spacing, I'm sorry, not 5/8 of an inch, 3/8 of an inch, correction. So from the pictogram to the outside border is 3/8 of an inch, from the text to the pictogram 3/8 of an inch, and from the Braille to the text 3/8 of an inch, and then border again 3/8 of an inch. So you pretty much have to have 3/8 of an inch on your file. Now customers could drop in guidelines and save these as templates, and they can create 4x4 template, 6x6 template, 8x8 template, and so on and so forth. And save those so they could just call up the template and drop in their artwork and so on. So what we're going to do is we're going to go through the EngraveLab Pro, or EngraveLab here. Now EngraveLab does come with a very extensive clip art gallery as well as all your fonts. If we go to the clip art viewer, and you'll notice there's quite a few different categories here. Now we're going to go to the general signage, and in here you're going to find a lot of clip art that can be used for ADA signage. So again, as we discussed yesterday, ADA signage is not only Braille signage, but also directional signage, wayfinding signs, things like that. So we're going to go through the list here. We're going to find a fairly simple one that we can use. And we'll use our good old, we'll go with nursery. We'll go with the little baby here. So when you select it, okay, in EngraveLab it's going to give you a little position here. You can just click anywhere on the screen. It's going to drop in the graphic. And this one's actually built out as a, I believe, a 10x7. Okay. Now, you have these outer lines in case you want to actually route out the material, but if you already have the material pre-cut, we can just get rid of the outline. We can go ahead and select our text and our little baby graphic here. We'll drop that in. Now, in the real world, I would go ahead and put in a guideline here for that 3/8 of an inch, and then 3/8 of an inch for the text. But for our purpose, I'm just going to kind of, so we'll go ahead and select the nursery text to be here. We're going to resize the baby a bit. So I'm going to hold down my shift key to kind of keep the proportion. I'll go ahead and center it. And EngraveLab does give you guide options, so you can actually do snap to guides, things like that. So again, I'm just going to kind of eyeball it here. for that 3/8 of an inch. Now the spacing between the characters can be anywhere from typically 110% spacing is what you'd want between your text when you're doing your raised text. Now as far as setting up the font for the Braille, we'll go ahead and select our text tools, and we're going to use the text compose function, which is the second option here, and we'll go down here under the nursery, create that text compose box, and for Braille everything needs to be lowercase unless it's the beginning of a sentence, a name, abbreviations, things like that. This is all covered. What I'm covering here, everything is covered in the manual that is provided with the Accent Signage pen starter kit. So we'll go all lowercase. We'll go ahead and select it. Now up here in your tool area you have this little icon here which is Braille. Now to configure our font, our Braille font, what we will do is right click on that Braille button and it'll bring up our Braille properties. Now the font that we want to use is BR Punch. If you're in California, and actually anywhere in the country, if you go with BR Punch CA, it's also compliant. California actually has a lot more restrictions on Braille. The laws are a little stricter. Okay, so we're going to go grade 2. Click OK. Now to convert the font, okay, we just simply select the text and simple click of the button will automatically convert that font for us, and then we can go ahead and reposition it. Now one of the things you got to keep from doing is this. You don't want to resize it like I just did there on the screen. The reason is now you've just resized the holes, and now the dots would not be compliant anymore. So there we have it. So there's kind of the quick and easy how to create a simple Braille sign. Now we have to apply our toolpaths. The beauty of EngraveLab is we don't have to apply a toolpath to the actual converted Braille, but we do have to create a toolpath for the text and the pictogram. Now with that, we'll go ahead and sweep select the graphic as well as the text. Over here on the left-hand side under your tools, you have your toolpath tools. When you click on that, you get the little flyout, and you have an online toolpath, a male, female, fill, chisel, drill, so on. Now, the toolpath that you want to use is the male toolpath. Now, when you select the male toolpath, we're going to select our character cutter. Okay, which is the 88 profile cutter. Okay, the one we bundle is the 10,000s. We're engraving at 0.032. If we click, now if you notice, just to the right of the depth setting here, we have the little button. If you click on that, we can set the number of passes. Okay, we're going to set that to 1 pass. Okay, the 350 as well as the EGX Pro series are capable of doing this in 1 pass. We'll go ahead and click OK. And we'll go ahead, I'll give it a color here. We'll color it black. And then click OK. Okay, so you notice how the line got a little thicker here. Okay, so what that is the actual toolpath itself, and that's to the actual outside of the character. So here's my text, and my cutter, based on the cutter I select, this is where it's going to actually cut. And what I'll have is from this point to that center point will actually be beveled. You'll actually have a nice little beveled edge on it. Okay. So there's our sign. Let me bring it back to the screen here. Zoom to the plate. All right, so there's a basic sign. Now, the fun part is setting up the engraving. Okay. So what we do is we go to Engrave. Okay, so unlike other programs where you go to File and Print Setup, with Engrave Lab, you actually go to the Engrave option and go to Engraving Defaults. Now, under the Engraving Defaults, okay, hopefully the customer did install their EGX 600 driver. If they did, or EGX 400 or EGX 350. If they did, they want to have that driver selected and click on Setup. Now, one of the things I've found in playing with this application is I've created kind of shortcuts. And this is actually going to kind of streamline the process, especially when I cover the hardware setup tomorrow. So what we do, or what I've done, is I'll select that driver, and I'm going to create a custom copy of that driver. Now, I'm going to call this EGX 600 Braille drill. Click OK. Okay, that's going to create a copy of it right there. I'm going to go ahead and create another copy of this driver, and I'm going to call this one character cutter. Okay, that's going to be for the pictogram and raised text. So, I mean, you could call it whatever you'd want. Okay, click OK. Now, if the customer's using a Pro Series machine and they have the auto inserter, we also want to create a copy of the driver for it. So we'll select copy of the driver, and here I'm going to call this Braille inserter, okay, or auto Braille, okay, whatever you want to call it. Click OK, and that creates my 3 copies. Okay. The beauty of this is that once you have that copy, you can set parameters specific to that function. This cuts down on errors as far as, you know, trying to remember what settings to use and so forth. So once we have that set, we'll go ahead and click Apply, click OK. Okay. And from our selected driver list, we now have the Roland EGX 600 Braille drill, character cutter, Braille inserter. So for the Braille drill, we're going to configure the driver. Okay. Under the tool, on the drop down, we're going to select Braille. Okay. Once you select Braille, we want to uncheck Output Toolpaths. Under the Engrave option, we're doing Sign Plate, and we're only engraving what is selected. We want to click Apply. Then we want to go to our tool options. Now, under the tool options, okay, for the cut velocity, this is our X and Y feed rate, okay? So our left to right, forward back feed rate. We can actually set that to the max speed, okay, which is 3.94 inches, okay? So if you just press the up arrow, it'll max out. For the plunge velocity, we do want to leave that at the 0.4 inches per second. This is actually a recommendation that Accent Signage gives. And the reason for that is you don't want to plunge too fast in the material because you may not cut that drill point quite accurately if you do go too fast. So if it punches, you know, too fast, you may get variations and the rasters may not stick. Okay, so we'll leave that at the 0.4. The beauty of EngraveLab is a lot of this is all preset. Gives us our clearance height. We can change that if we like. And then it automatically sets our braille depth, although tomorrow when we go over the hardware portion of it, we're going to be running the machine in Auto Z control, so we get the consistency. So all this command is doing is just providing the command to be able to generate the toolpath. So we'll click OK, click Apply, and that's it. So we've configured the braille drill. All right, so once we've configured the braille drill, the next tool to configure is our character cutter. Okay, this is going to be the cutter that we use to cut the pictogram in our raised text, or to route it out. So again, under the tool, on the drop-down menu, we're going to select Auto Z Enabled. Under the Output Toolpaths, we want to uncheck it and then recheck it. When you recheck it, it's going to pop up your toolpath options window. We want to make sure that the cut contour paths is unchecked. Okay, so we're going to leave it at Output Toolpaths, cut contour unchecked, and the other options also unchecked. Okay, this is going to ensure that we cut in one pass, and it doesn't try to cut on the line as far as the contour. So we'll go ahead and click OK. Again, under the Engrave option, Sign Plate and Selected. And again, we want to click on Apply. Once we've applied the settings on this screen, we can then go to our tool options. Under the tool options for the cut velocity, if you're using the EGX 350, you can set the XY speed to 0.75 inches per second. If you're using the EGX Pro series, we can set that to 1.5 inches per second. For the plunge velocity, we can set that to the max value. Okay, so for the EGX Pro, it's 2 inches, and for the EGX 350, it's 30 millimeters, so it's 1.3 inches, I believe, off the top of my head. So we can set the plunge velocity, which is your Z, up and down to the max. And then we'll go ahead and click OK, and then Apply. Once we come back to the output screen, we'll go ahead and click Apply, and that now configures our character cutter. Okay? So the third tool that we have to configure is our Braille inserter. Again, this is only going to affect customers that have the Pro Series engraver and have the auto inserter, which we will be covering tomorrow. So if we select the Braille inserter, again, for the tool, it's going to be Braille. We're going to uncheck Output Toolpaths once more. Under Engrave, Sign Plate selected. And we are going to actually have a Y offset, okay? Because the pen is mounted just forward of the spindle, we actually have to put an offset on it, so that way when it goes to insert the rasters, it's going to perform that offset and then start to insert the rasters automatically. And we're going to cover the detailed configuration of that tomorrow during the hardware session. Now, because that auto pen should be perpendicular to the spindle unit, the only function or the only option you should have to set is the Y move. You really shouldn't have to mess with the X move. Okay? For the X, as far as the angle, that's something you can actually adjust on the hardware, okay, on the actual raster pen itself or the auto inserter. Now the base value for this Y move typically is going to be right at that 1.46 inch setting. Okay, so basically that measurement is from the center of the Braille inserter to the center of your Braille dot cutter. Okay, and it'll vary, 1.47, 1.45, but on average it's typically 1.46. Now for this, we're going to click on Apply. Again, we're going to go to our tool options. Now the beauty here is for our cut velocity, we're going to set it to the max setting of the driver. For the plunge velocity, we're also going to set that to the max setting of the driver. Okay? For the clearance height, I typically go 0.25 inches. That should give us just enough clearance to clear the compression on the spring, come up, come over, and come over to the next dot. Okay, but again, customers can play with this number to try to speed up the process. Okay, the beauty is on an EGX Pro, using the auto inserter, running it at max speed, you can insert 2 rasters per second, which is pretty quick, especially if you're doing 4x4s and you're doing 16 at a time, or 6x6s, multiples. That's where the auto inserter really comes in handy. So we'll go ahead and click OK. Again, we'll click Apply and Close. Now, when we're ready to go ahead and output the file, okay, so tomorrow's workflow, when we cover the hardware, we're going to output the Braille first, and then we're going to insert the rasters, then we're going to apply our tactile material, and then we're going to route out the text. Now, as far as the workflow, customers actually can bounce back and forth however they want, but what I've found to be easiest is to do the Braille first, then the pictogram. Okay? So what we do is you just simply select the Braille. Now you notice I didn't apply a toolpath to it. You just select the Braille, click on Engrave, Engraving Defaults. We want to select the Braille drill, apply it, close, and then when you go to Engrave and Output, okay, the only thing you should see on your screen is the Braille. Okay. Now when you're ready to cut, you simply click on the Engrave icon here. That's going to process the data to the engraver. Engraver's going to go over, drill the holes, and then you can go in and do your raster inserter. So you can insert the rasters in using either the manual pen. If you have the auto pen, once I've completed this job and configured the machine for the auto inserter, I would come back here, go to my engraving defaults once again, select my Braille inserter. You'll notice that all the settings carry over. Click Apply, Close, go to Engrave, Output. Again, the only thing we should see is the Braille. Now when I send that job, that offset command is going to get sent to the engraver, and it should insert the rasters. Once you've applied your tactile material, again, you can just cut out what you need. You don't have to waste too much material. You place that on there, peel the backer off, peel the top protective sheet off, change the cutters on the machine, and again, tomorrow when we cover the actual hardware, we're going to go through the actual workflow of changing the cutter out. We would change it out to our character cutter. Then what we would do is just sweep select our pictogram and text, go to Engrave, go to our engraving defaults, select character cutter. Again, all the parameters are already pre-configured. Click Close, go back to Engrave and Output. At this point, The only thing you'll see now is the pictogram. Okay? No Braille down here. Okay? At this point, you would hit the engrave button. Off it goes. It's going to go ahead and engrave that sign. Okay? So we'll go ahead and close this out. Okay? Now that pretty much covers the workflow using EngraveLab. Again, not as difficult as some customers think. So now we're going to go over to Flexi. Do we have any questions on the EngraveLab before we move on? We also have written documentation on the support site as well as on RNet that covers all of this as well. As far as one of the questions was the timer, fortunately EngraveLab does not have any type of timer to tell you how long this takes to process engraving. But once you've got those shortcuts done and you have your tools dialed in, your toolpath set up, I've actually been able to produce a complete ADA sign in right about 2 to 3 minutes. So obviously it looks longer when you're doing a class because you're explaining everything, but once you get the hang of it and do it a few times, it typically takes about 3 minutes to produce a ADA sign from start to finish. Okay, and how do we set up multiple plates? I'll cover that tomorrow, but basically you would create the complete bed and you would lay it out that way. Basically you do kind of a copy and paste almost. You could also do serialization with the Braille, so you can create the Braille, do serialization to where it will actually update your numeric values as well as text values along with the Braille. So you can even configure that. Now for more information on that, if you go to when you install EngraveLab, it actually gives you some tutorials that you can actually refer to that covers serialization and multiple plates. Okay, so you can refer to those documents. All right, so I'm going to go ahead and close out EngraveLab here. Let me save this file because we're going to use this tomorrow. When we actually do the practical. Now a sign like this, as far as materials, you're probably looking $2 to $3 to create it. Okay, as far as material. Sell price on something like this, unframed, probably about 10, 12 bucks. If you frame it, you're probably looking somewhere 20, 25 bucks. And the beauty is because you can produce it kind of on the fly, you've got quicker turnaround times, which again you can actually charge a premium for. All right, so next on the list here, we're going to try to get this going. We may run a little over, so please bear with me because we did have that slight technical difficulty. But we're going to go over FlexiEngrave. Again, the version that we offer is Flexi 10. Again, if you have customers that already have Flexi Sign, they can simply purchase the Engrave module. Okay, and the Engrave module they can actually get from Scanvic Amiable. Now, when you launch FlexiEngrave, it's going to come up to your design screen here, and in the Design Central section, we're going to go ahead and set our sign up as an 8x8. Okay. Now you notice over here is all your engraving tools, but they're grayed out because we don't have any data here. But we're going to go ahead and import our design. Okay. Now Flexi also comes with a ton of clip art, and they actually even went one step further, and they actually created some pre-built ADA signs with the Braille and everything. So for your standard signs, we can actually just go in And let's see, we can go ahead and select one of these here. So we'll go ahead and select the men's room sign. Okay, we'll go ahead, drop it in here. Okay, so there's our men's room sign. I'm going to zoom out a bit. Now you notice that with the Flexi product, they actually, created the text as well as the Braille. But I'm going to show you the Braille process. So we're going to get rid of that text there. And what I'm going to do is go ahead and select the text here as well. I'm going to take off the fill, and we're just going to put an outline on here. Same thing with the text. Okay, so for the Braille, I'm going to go ahead and just delete that. We're going to go ahead and select our text tool. Okay, under the Design Central, okay, we can select our text. We can specify the format of our text spacing, text width. We'll go ahead and select our area under the word men. We'll type in the word men. Okay, it doesn't matter what size it is, if it's big or small. Just type it in, lowercase. We'll go to text, go to Braille, click text to Braille. So as far as setting up the Braille, Flexi is a little quicker at doing that. So we're going to go ahead and move that over. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and select the text here, and we're going to go ahead and scale that up a little bit more. So that's a little too much. Bring that back over. Bring our Braille down. Resize our man here a little bit. All right, so again, here's our sign. Just like we did in Engrave Lab, we're going to select our pictogram and our text. And we're going to select our profile fill, is what they call it in Flexi Engrave, but our mail toolpath. So if a customer just has Flexi Sign, they're going to have all of these features here, but they won't have the engrave function here, and they won't have these tools. So we're going to go ahead and select the profile fill. We're selecting a 10th thou engraver. Okay. The offset, we'll leave it at the default. We're cutting to the outside of the object. Okay, so once we select the object, let's see here, hold on. For some reason it deselected. Select the tool, select our cutter, simply click on the apply button, and that will apply the tool path. And let me zoom in on it here. Went a little too far past it. Still wants to go. Let's go back here to view. Now what we want to do is show the tool diameter. Okay. Show fills. Okay, so we're showing the tool diameter. So you really can't see it too much because it's a thin tool path. And for the Braille, simply select the Braille. Okay. Over here it's grade 2. lowercase only, shows us the dot size. We're doing a drill function. Okay, so we're doing a hole fill. So when you select it, center a path. The tool is a .062. They call it an end mill in here, but it's .062. Okay, we're doing holes, and we click apply. Okay, and you notice it turned gray. So that creates our file. Okay, so again, creating the file is not that difficult. That's actually the easy part. The hard part is configuring the driver and actually outputting the sign, which again we will be covering tomorrow. So this is how you would generate the sign. Now for the fun part is to engrave. So we're going to go ahead and select our file. Going to go ahead and click on the Engrave button. And what this is going to do is it's going to launch our Production Manager. Okay, so those of you that are familiar with Flexi, you have another program that's tied to it, which is called Production Manager. All right, so here's Production Manager. All right, so here we go. All right, so we've got Production Manager up. Okay, so the first thing we have to do is you add your setup. When you go to add your setup, you've got engravers, Roland, and then this is where you have your list of engravers. Okay, so if we're using the EGX 600, you select it, go next, give it a name, how it's connected. If you're using a USB to parallel adapter, or if you're on the parallel port, you'd select that port, and then you would click Finish. Okay, I already have the driver installed, and actually I have it installed as file. But the same thing like in EngraveLab, you can create multiple copies of it. Okay, so we can actually duplicate the setup, have one for the offset, and so forth. So actually we need to resend the job. So let's go back to our file here. Let me verify that I have the right toolpath applied to this. Got that. So toolpath. Let's go to our advanced, .033. We're good. Apply it. All right, so we're good. So again, we'll go ahead and select everything. There we go. So that's going to drop that into our Production Manager. Okay. So in the Production Manager, again, we're doing an 8x8 sign. Okay. So that's the material. Doing selection only. So we're good there. Okay. Under the panel size, we want panel to border selected. Okay, so it panels it. Okay, and we can send all the jobs, which in this case we don't, or we can send each individual component. So there's my Braille component, and there's my Engrave component. Okay. So for the Engrave component, if we double click on it, okay, comes up with our XY speed, Z speed, spindle speed. Now if you noticed in EngraveLab, it didn't give you a spindle command. Okay, the spindle command is done manually if you're running out of EngraveLab, so you would set it on the actual controller. If you're using Flexi, you can actually set the spindle command here. Now when you're doing the pictogram or raised text, you'd want to run the spindle right around 16 to 18,000 RPM. When you're doing the braille drill, you want it down in the right around the 10 to 12,000 RPM range. Okay. So for the pictogram and raised text, okay, again, we want to run it at right around 50 millimeters per second. Okay, it's about 2 inches per second. We can even run it a little bit slower so we're not ripping through the material. For the Z speed, we could set that to the max, okay, which is 50. For the spindle speed, again, for Pro Series, EGX Pro Series, we can run it at about 24,000 RPM. If you're using a 350, you want to be at like that 18,000 range. We'll go ahead and apply it. Click OK. Okay, for the braille drill, same thing. For this, we can actually set our XY speed to max. The Z speed, we want to set that to about 10 millimeters per second. And for the spindle speed, again, right around that 10 to 12,000 RPM range. And then click OK. Okay. We want to go ahead and uncheck this. Now, when we're ready to output the file, okay, we simply select the one that we want to output. Okay. In this case, it's going to be the braille drill. And then you simply click on Send. This will actually send the braille drill to the machine, and then at that point we can do the manual insertion of the braille. If we're using the auto insertion or the auto inserter, what we would do is go back to our material tab, and for our offset, we would set it here under the sheet offset. Okay, so that 1.46 inch offset you would drop in here. Then you would come back to your job, select the braille drill, and then send it again once you've configured the machine. So once you pull the tool up, drop the pen down. Again, tomorrow we're going to cover that in the hardware section. And once we're done, we load our tactile material, change out the tool, come back in here, select our .010, and again here we're going to click on Send as well. And that's going to actually output our pictogram or raised text. Once we're done, simply brush off the excess using the supplied brush. You weed out the excess, and now you've got your complete sign. So again, we don't have the visual yet, but tomorrow we'll tie all of that in together to complete the job. Now this area you see here is the actual table area of the engraver itself. Okay, so if you notice it's 16 by 24 table size. Okay, so if we're doing 8-up or 8-inch signs, we can actually do 6 at a time if they're 8 by 8. Okay, so we can gang them up that way. Okay, so that is, again, the basic workflow for producing a braille sign out of Flexi. And again, tomorrow when we cover the hardware aspect of it, we're going to tie all of it together. We're going to show you the output from Flexi. We're going to show you the actual output from EngraveLab and the hands-on setup of the machine itself. Okay? So that brings our little EngraveLab and Flexi Engrave session pretty much to an end. I do apologize for the slight technical difficulties we had here earlier with the microphone, and rest assured we'll make sure we have that resolved for tomorrow's live presentation with the engravers. Tomorrow's presentation is going to be, we'll have an actual EGX 350 as well as an EGX 600. and we will be covering zeroing out the cutters, so both the braille cutter, the character cutter, installing the collet, the nose cone, as well as show you how the manual pen is used, as well as the auto insertion pen. And we will also show you what's included in the actual ADA sign kit, the accent signage, the raster pen kit. Okay, so that's going to be covered tomorrow. So hopefully we won't have any issues, and we'll have a good turnout. Now go into a couple of questions. So if you have any questions, now is the time to go ahead and pop those up, and we'll go through some of the questions you guys have. Let's see. One of the questions is if the ADA bundle that contains the raster pen also contain the licensing rights to do ADA. It does. Actually, the customer has to sign the license before we actually will ship the product. Okay, so the customer actually gets the documentation, signs and accepts the license agreement, and then they pay for the kit. There are no extra licensing fees. There's no fee involved with it. What they're doing is they're agreeing to the license when they purchase the kit. Okay. Let's see, what is the machine dimensional tolerance on the X, Y, and Z axis? Which machine are we referring to? That was one of the questions that we had. Now, as far as software, my personal preference is EngraveLab. I've used it on a daily basis. For me, it's easier to work with than having to deal with the production manager. But again, there's people that have the preference of FlexiEngrave, and therefore the reason we also carry it. We want to make sure we cater it to everybody. But again, if there's a new user, my personal preference is the EngraveLab product. Another question here was, is there a document with the tool settings, etc.? We do have a support document that does cover the hardware and software workflow. It is in the process of being updated to cover some of the additional tools as far as like making the copies and all of that. But the general overview of everything is in there. Okay. Let's see. Now, as far as machine dimensions, the EGX 350 is 12-inch by 9-inch engravable area. EGX 400 is 16 wide by 12 high engraving area, and the EGX 600 is 24 inches by 16 inches. As far as the clearance, the Z clearance on all of these machines, on all three, is 1.57 inches. Okay, and again, tomorrow when we cover the actual hardware, you guys will actually see the bed size and how that's laid out. Chances are I will do another webinar that would cover multi-plate production, multi-plate braille production as well. But in the meantime, if you need information on doing multi-plates, you can actually refer to the tutorials or the README files for either Flexi or EngraveLab, and it should cover that. All right, well, it looks like we don't have any more questions. Again, I thank you for bearing with me on some of the technical difficulties, and rest assured we'll make sure it's resolved for tomorrow's session. And if you have any other questions, again, you can contact Adam or myself. We'll be more than happy to get those for you. The presentation from yesterday will be posted later on today, hopefully, for you guys to download. The video here that we just covered We will edit out some of those dead spots where we had the technical difficulties, but we will make sure that that's posted as well. And tomorrow when we cover the hardware, again, that's going to be recorded and available for you guys to download also. So again, if there's no other questions, on behalf of Roland and the Academy team, I'd like to thank you for joining me today. And again, any questions, sales questions, pre-sales, post-sales, please do not hesitate to contact Adam and myself. And with that said, have a great day and happy selling.